And now our ninth presenter, Tanya Jayne from the School of Biological Sciences, and her topic, Fishing for a Cure for Alzheimer's Disease.
I'd like you to imagine you're in a room full of strangers. You feel anxious because you don't know anyone. Now imagine being told that those strangers are actually your close friends and family. You've simply forgotten them. It's a scary thought, isn't it? Unfortunately, this is reality for over 350,000 Australians who are currently living with dementia, most of whom have Alzheimer's disease. And even though Alzheimer's was first recognised as a disease over 100 years ago, and over 100,000 research articles have been published, we still do not have a clear understanding of the disease process. There have been hundreds of clinical trials of drugs designed to target the features of the Alzheimer brain depicted above. But of the few that made it through to testing on humans, all have failed to cure or effectively prevent disease progression. This repeated failure to treat Alzheimer's by targeting these disease features has led to much debate as to whether they should remain the focus of research efforts. So what can we do differently? Well, Alzheimer's disease can be caused by rare mutations, and a recent study showed that children who carry one of these mutations already have changes in their brains as young as 9 years old, even though these carriers will not typically exhibit Alzheimer's-like symptoms until decades later. But we cannot perform invasive surgeries or tests on children to examine their brains in detail. So how can we identify these early changes that ultimately lead to Alzheimer's disease decades later? Well, in our laboratory, we use zebrafish as a tool or model to study Alzheimer's disease. And yes, I know what you're all thinking, but wait, humans don't have scales or a tail, and fish aren't even mammals. And aren't fish cold-blooded? How can we possibly study human disease using fish? And while it's true that zebrafish do not resemble humans closely on the outside, when we look deeper, all the way down to the genetic level, we see that zebrafish are actually about 70% genetically similar to humans. So we use the latest in genome engineering technologies to engineer these Alzheimer's disease-causing mutations into the equivalent zebrafish gene. We have developed the world's first zebrafish models of these mutations. And when we look deep inside the brains of these fish, we see significant changes in brain function at very early ages. And interestingly, many of the changes we see are linked to problems associated with Alzheimer's disease, such as inflammation, sleep, and energy production. Zebrafish are an outstanding system for use in the discovery of drugs to treat human diseases. So our next step is to use our Alzheimer's fish to screen for drugs that can correct the changes we see. This research is helping us to understand the initial changes in brains that ultimately leads to Alzheimer's disease. A greater understanding of these early changes will open up new possibilities for the development of therapies aimed at preventing or delaying the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's amazing how zebrafish are used, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
In so many different systems
Yeah.
and so forth. To what extent does the, I guess, the physiology of the condition that you can see in a zebrafish resemble the human situation? You were saying about the similarities. So, I mean, for example, do you get amyloid plaques or anything developing when you've introduced mutations and so forth?
Yeah. We actually don't see amyloid plaques in the brains that when we've looked. We don't actually really compare them physiologically as a physiological model. What we try to do is look at the genetics and look at what genes are changed in response to this mutation. And because genes obviously encode for proteins, so then what proteins are being changed, we can then find some chemical compounds or things that can, correct those changes and fix the problem, hopefully, at that level. Those zebrafish brains don't look exactly like a human brain. The processes within the brain are very comparable to a human brain, so we can use that and target that. Thanks.